Hey guys, I'm Daniel Gibbon and I just graduated being able to achieve a UCAT of 3,160, getting 870 in the quantitative reasoning subset. And today I'm going to try to help you achieve even better. I'm going to be giving an overview of the quantitative reasoning subset and then give my advice on how to prepare and answer quantitative reasoning questions. In quantitative reasoning, you are given 24 minutes to answer 36 questions, giving you 40 seconds per question. These questions are all worth 1 mark, with there being a ranging difficulty and length. These questions can either be standalone, or there can be a set of questions all in regards to the same premise. The purpose of this subset is to test your ability to analyze graphs and data, and then apply mathematical skills to solve problems. The math that you actually need for this subset is actually very basic, with you needing to be familiar with things like averages, percentages, fractions and ratios, conversions, the speed formula of speed equals distance over time, as well as things such as finding the area and volume of geometric shapes, and also applying mathematical knowledge to things like interest rates and percentage changes. Now, given a very brief overview of the quantitative reasoning subset, I'm now going to quickly go through my step-by-step process, which I recommend you to use to answer any single quantitative reasoning question, and then also give a couple extra tips on how you can prepare for the quantitative reasoning subset. So the first step isn't actually to read the question, but instead to really in-depthly analyze the premise, especially if it's something like a graph or a table, and ensure that you completely understand all of the axes titles. So you really need to analyze all the axes titles and all the information within the graphs and the diagrams before you actually move on. So I spent a little bit of time here making sure that you understand exactly what it means, and then you can then move on to the question, and then you'll be able to understand what the question is in regards to and exactly what values or how you need to analyze that graph to answer that question. And you also need to be very careful when analyzing that graph to find numerical values, as you ensure that you need to be very accurate with those estimates. The next step is to read the actual question. However, you have to read it very carefully, paying special attention to all of the words they use, and especially any mathematical language which indicates what mathematical operations you're going to need to perform to solve this question. The next step is to quickly plan out exactly how you're going to approach tackling this question, planning out all of the different steps that you need to take to get to your final answer. And this should be quite a quick process, and you can develop over time with practice. And then once you've quickly planned it out, you then need to actually solve the problem, doing any of the necessary mathematical calculations and noting down any particularly important numbers and trying to clearly show clear working of the process in case that you find at the end of the process you've done an error, so you can check it very easily. And also if you need those numbers or that information for the next question, so it can really help to organize any working that you need to do very clearly on your whiteboard. Then you obviously need to choose the corresponding answer option. However, if you do not have the correct answer and the answer does not match up with one of the options, you have 2 options. Either if you're pretty confident it was a very small mistake and you likely just put something into your calculator wrong, then quickly redo the question. However, if you think it's more of a fundamental misunderstanding of how to do the question, then flag and skip that question and then maybe come back to it if you have time. But ensure that you actually put a guess in just in case. Another tip is to always use the simplest method possible, doing things like converting numbers into different units as little as possible to answer the question. Another important step here is that whenever you finish the question and that you think that you've actually taken a bit of an inefficient route, you need to sit down and analyze what exact route you took and what exact route you should have taken, why exactly you took the less efficient method, and how exactly you can prevent yourself from taking this inefficient method in the future and instead take the faster and more simpler method. You also have to be very careful when it comes to rounding, watching out for the question asking for a specific amount of decimals, or if it's a natural number, really thinking about what it actually means when you're rounding. So if you was asking maybe how many bags of apples do I need to have X amount of apples, and you come up with 2.4 bags, you're obviously going to actually need 3 bags of apples for that number. So you're really going to think about when you're rounding with natural numbers and be very aware of that as well. Finally, if you're sort of running out of time, you should guesstimate your answers, maybe rounding the numbers to the nearest 10 and then doing some really quick and rough calculations just so you can get an idea of which answer option is most likely correct. Finally, I'll give some tips on how to most effectively prepare for quantitative reasoning. And I think one of the most important things is to actually practice using the online calculator, as it can be quite fiddly and tricky to master, and it is an incredibly important skill to master so that you can save some time on the quantitative reasoning subset and perform at your best. So I would strongly recommend that you actually do your practice on a Windows PC or laptop with an external keyboard which has a dedicated number pad. And then you can then practice using this number pad and doing these calculations really quickly so that when the test day comes, you're very proficient with the calculator so you can save some extra seconds that you can actually use to answer more questions or spend more time answering the questions. And also, because the calculator can be quite slow in calculations, I would also strongly recommend trying to do all the simple calculations by yourself, maybe using the whiteboard and pen as well, as it can save a couple valuable seconds and also keep track of all the numbers that you're doing. So it might also help to actually practice some of those basic subtraction, addition and multiplication so that you can do those calculations quicker on the actual test day. And like I said earlier, you should also practice organizing your whiteboard and keeping track of any really important numbers that you can either use for any subsequent questions on the same question set, or if you get the answer wrong and need to check your working along the way. So it can be really helpful to practice actually organizing your whiteboard. Finally, my last preparation tip is to actually make a glossary for all the mathematical words that you come across in your practice. As I said earlier, it is very important that you read the question really carefully, focusing on that mathematical language which shows you what mathematical operations you need to perform. And one way that you can make this a lot easier and improve your interpretation ability and the speed at which you interpret questions is to actually make a glossary of all the different English words which correspond to a particular mathematical function. So this would be trying to find all the different words that could mean addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, or equating two things. So finding all the words that mean these things and then defining their meaning and giving an example of their meaning as well. And I'll show some example glossaries so you can get a good idea. So here I have some example glossaries in which I've created a glossary for addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and the equal sign. And here I've given words that basically mean addition or indicate that you're going to need to add things. And then I've given their corresponding example in which they were used and the mathematical equation which you had to use based off the example and the words used in the premise. And then you do this for all the different words, all the different mathematical language that you come across, so that when you actually read it for the next time, you know exactly what it means and you can answer the questions quickly with less error. So that's all the tips that I have for quantitative reasoning today. I hope you found that useful, and if you did, please leave a like. Also, I have other videos regarding UCAT and all the different subsets and preparing, and also have an ATAR reaction video if you're interested. I'll also be obviously doing more videos about ATAR, UCAT and life in general, and if you're interested in those and would like to see those videos in the future, please subscribe. Also, if you have any video ideas, I would really appreciate it if you leave it in the comments below.